July 15th, 2015. Guys, I've had a lot of questions, especially with the series we've been doing lately, about where did the Planet X theory originate. You're looking at information from NASA and their astrophysics data system. It's actually in the harvard.edu website. Notice the address at the top. It did not start online. It did not start with conspiracy theory. It actually is ancient. But let's look at NASA's information. It says Planet X predictions. Groups at the U.S. Naval Observatory in Washington and at Teledyne Brown Engineering in Huntsville, Alabama, are attempting to solve for the orbit and present location of the planet. Observations of both Uranus and Neptune are now being used, although each has its limitations. These calculations for Planet X are much more difficult than those predicting Neptune from its effects on Uranus. The systematic variations that are now observed are much smaller than those of Uranus 2 centuries ago. In fact, they are not much larger than the observational uncertainties. In other words, something passed out. It passed out of the solar system over 200 years ago. They're saying in 2 centuries, 200 years ago. Now, it goes on to say that in addition, the orbital period of Planet X is expected to be much larger than that of Neptune, probably 500 years, possibly up to 1,000. Gil Broussard saying almost 400 at an average of 380 to 390 right in there. The Bactunes were 392 years. But guys, this is NASA astrophysics data system. Again, they have been looking for this thing, and when it got close to the 90s, I think they had found it, and they stopped talking about it. And we're going to go through a lot more information about that very subject. But again, you're talking about Naval Observatory. They're looking for it. They're predicting the orbits. They're looking at the fluctuations of the orbits of the planets on the outer solar system. Noticing that something has went through and disturbed those orbits. We've been talking about that. I will link to this information, but again, there's your web address at the top. Again, 400 years is much closer to 500 if you're speculating than 1,000 is. But it says there's also the problem that any solution actually produces 2 positions. Now, they've narrowed it down since this report. But it says, just as you cannot tell if the moon is overhead or underfoot just because it's high tide, it's the same thing in looking for missing planets. The resolution of this question depends on other things than which solution gives the best formal numerical result, such as the fact that one result puts the planet in the area searched by Tombaugh, one of the scientists, and the other does not. We also have the problem of still not knowing exactly the mass of Neptune. And that would help them to know the mass of this object. But again, they didn't know the exact mass of Neptune. But in the last paragraph, it says the most recent predictions, this is in 88, of Planet X. One guy saying it would be coming from the region of Scorpius, while Gomez says Taurus. Now, since then, they've narrowed that down, and we'll talk about that. Now, Tombaugh goes back to 1929. It says he began a search at the Lowell Observatory, which resulted in the discovery of Pluto in 1930. So searching for Planet X. He continued that search until 43, covering a large part of the sky for objects as faint as 16th magnitude. There are various parts of the sky he did not cover, and of course there's the possibility that the planet could be fainter than 16th magnitude. It must be remembered that there are some objects with matter much darker than normal. The satellite of Saturn, Iapetus, has a dark side and a light side. The rings of Uranus are much darker than expected, and Comet Halley is darker than coal. Now, the infrared astronomical satellite IRIS. Now, remember that one sentence. That's going to be important. It surveyed the sky looking for objects radiating in the infrared. That means only visible with heat-sensitive cameras. Since this planet would be nearer than any other source, warmer than any other source, it should appear relatively bright in the infrared. The easy way it would be detected, however, is by its motion with respect to the stars. the detectability of the motion of such a planet during the time between observations and the accuracy with which the positions could be determined. That's how they make JPL orbits and things like that, guys. It says the IRIS results have not discovered the existence of a 10th planet, but the data is still being studied. Now, the traditional ground-based search has not been forgotten. That goes to Palomar, and since that article, you have Lucifer that was put up by the Vatican on Mount Graham in southeast Arizona. This is in the same information from NASA Astrophysics. This is where the two guys differed 20 years ago and beyond as far as the differences, but that has been narrowed down. You're looking at the orbits where they think Planet X is. Again, almost two completely different areas that it's coming from. Many people think the southern hemisphere. I tend to lean that way because of the extreme amount of telescopes now in Chile, all the way to Antarctic. Even Mount Graham at certain times of the year is pointed south far enough in Arizona to see this thing with those giant infrared Lucifer optics. This particular page is from NASA, the SAO. It's discussion of current status of Planet X. Guys, this is coming from the Naval Observatory in Washington, South Florida University, Tampa, Florida. Not online conspiracy theory. This is the closest thing that we've got as far as formal information. They're talking about infrared astronomy satellite. They know that that's what they're going to find it, and that's why, and I've said it for a long time, they're looking for something in the infrared. But they pointed to two other predictions. Conley Powell at Teledyne Brown Engineering is predicting a body with a semi-major axis of 60.8 astronomical units. That's 1 AU, guys, is the distance between the Earth and the Sun. It says an inclination of 9 degrees and a mass of 3 Earth masses. The present position is in Gemini. Are you listening? Harrington predicts a semi-major axis of 100 AU. That's an important number, remember that. An inclination of 32 degrees and a mass of 4 Earth masses, and he predicts this is in Scorpio. These papers are in preparation. After this, they got their infrared information, satellites up and ground-based satellites, and they went quiet. I think they found what they were looking for. I went forward in Stellarium to March 26, 2016. That's Gil Broussard's date of possible encounter with this object. To the right is Pollux. That's Gemini, the twins. That was one area. To the left, just coming up, is the claw of the Scorpio. You see that? At Antares. In the center is where Gil Broussard has put his map, right in between the two scientists. But here, they're talking about another possibility that may have caused these planets to tilt, is that there's a cloud of comets with approximately 100 Earth masses that would do the same thing. Guys, we would have seen that, but an object like they're talking about could be gathering this type of comet debris. Then they realized they needed bigger instruments, and that's when they wanted to use the Hubble. It says they wanted to use the guide star plates and whether non-stellar images in those plates could be identified as unknown planets. And they started doing that. They also launched IRIS, the infrared satellite, and several others. But that's exactly what they knew they had to do. And there's some very interesting information on about how these type objects can be hidden, and you need the heat signature. But you're looking at Lucifer on Mount Graham in Arizona. That's the Vatican's. There's our AS or IRIS. But guys, when they started doing that, they started getting images like this. Then they shut down the scientists from talking about Planet X altogether. Now, it might as well have never existed, but they have spent tons and tons of money and time studying this object. They say they think it's a star. It has gotten closer to the Earth by 30% in the last 15 years. This has heat signature coming out both sides. Why would we not see it in the center? You see that dark edge to the right? I'll show you why. Because this thing, because of its density, is pulling so many objects towards it that it's created a debris cloud. And I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Not only that, they know it has one orbital planet or moon going around this thing. Now, how would it survive with that type of heat? A question to be asked, unless that is not a full 360 radiant, it's blowing out the backside. These are, again, NASA images from the Hubble. See this HST at the bottom? Also here, they are paying very close attention to this. Notice in 2003, 2009, 6 years difference. That's the planet that's going around this object. That's how much closer it's got by about 30%. Now, they're saying that it would take a long time for this to get here. They're not giving us all the information about it. They're calling it Beta Pictoris, that star. They're calling that planet Pictoris B. Check this out, guys. This is a lot closer than what they're saying. That is supposed to be the object you see with the fire shooting out the side with the planet beside it. Again, these are the rings that you see with the debris objects. That's how much debris is with this particular system. Now, they've looked at it. These are the Hubble images and the IRAS images. Here are the most amazing. This is 2012 at the top, Hubble. 1997 at the bottom. You've got 15-year span. That black spot from Hubble is this debris cloud. At certain times, this is not visible except for the outside heat signatures. Think about that. They have, again, continued to watch this year after year. Again, we haven't seen anything since 2012 on it. Again, this is another IRAS image from that particular vantage point. Here, they're talking about the size of it. 50 AU out each side or 100 astronomical units. That's what they were talking about that could be the size of this thing. You can see that that's tremendous. 1 AU is the distance between the Earth and the Sun. Here, again, they're continuing to study this thing. Look at the bottom left image. You can see the actual heat signatures and what the wings that go out and fade to the back. In the center, and the yellow is the star, the green is the planet that is orbiting it. This thing has much more than that. They've actually spent the money through NASA and the ESO to put this piece of graphic information together. This is the object they're watching as it's pulling in comets, not just small degree, pulling in comets with its magnetic field. Why would they go to the trouble to continually watch this thing year after year but go silent on their search for Planet X? When they already had known something had happened, they were very close to the orbital period that Gill has on his models. But they have, again, went to the cost and the time and trouble to animate what they think is going on with this object. Now, that would be quite a debris trail. We're watching it. Do not forget our Block Talk show coming up in 2 days at 1 p.m. Central. East Coast, you're going to be 2 p.m. I think, what would you be, about 11 a.m. on the West Coast, guys. Don't miss it. We're going to have Gil Broussard on there, the Planet 7X series. It's going to be a lot of information that him and I can share. We're going to take some callers, too. Heads up.